I don't know if there's any Bob Dylan fans in the house. Any of you guys like Bob Dylan? Okay, like three of you. It's Dave Scriven. I think you're alone, man. And it's funny because at our 8 a.m., our gatherings get progressively younger and younger. And now at 8 a.m., everyone's like, yeah. And you guys are like, whoo. So growing up, this is actually one of my first memories. I was born in England, and at the age of 8, we moved to Southern California. But my dad really, really loved Bob Dylan. He was constantly playing him in the house. And remember, there's that old 1979 album when Bob Dylan became a Jesus follower for a season at least. He put out this album called Slow Train Coming, which is actually a really, really good album. And one of the songs on that record is called You've Got to Serve Somebody. Has anyone heard that song? Okay, isn't it amazing how someone who can sing so badly can also make such incredible music? Like Bob Dylan's voice, that's a whole nother conversation. But you say careful. This is awesome. In that song though, the premise of that song, Bob Dylan's making this point, like it doesn't matter what your story is or what your background is or where you're from or whatever, we all serve somebody. Might be the devil, might be the Lord, but you've got to serve somebody. And he's making a really good point because the fact of the matter is, no matter who you are today, you're serving someone, you're following someone, you're being shepherded by someone. You might think, no, I'm a maverick and I'm the master of my own ship. Well, you're actually following something. Every one of us is following something. It could be the ebbs and flows of media. It could be our own culture in which we find ourselves in. Maybe you're all about the American dream and comfort and the white picket fence. Maybe it's an addiction that has a hold on your life. Maybe it's social trends, celebrities, politics, or maybe it's a relationship and you're looking to some person to shepherd you or satisfy the core longings of your heart. Every one of us today, no exceptions, are serving and following someone. And it's fascinating because now science is really catching up with this. Recent studies have shown that we're actually hardwired to follow. Psychologists in the article that came out not too long ago, they pointed out after numerous studies that within minutes after our birth, we begin to mimic the face of our mother. They've also demonstrated that at the age of 3 months on, we begin to follow the gaze of her eyes. And then from 9 months on, we begin to look at the things that she's looking at, and then we check to make sure she's still looking at it. So for example, if your mom is watching, say, Stranger Things 3, at 9 months on, you're looking at the same thing. Okay, you're watching it too, but then you check back, is she still watching? And if she's not, then you begin to look at the thing that she's looking at. And the point of this article and all these studies is we're kind of natural born followers. No one gets this more than media and advertising, right? I came across this book recently called Nudge. It's a good book, but it's also kind of depressing because it talks about how culture takes advantage of this innate desire to follow, and they do it in a very crafty way where you think you're free. You think you're autonomous and making all the decisions, but in reality, they've actually created the context in which those decisions are made. Sociologists call this choice architecture. So what businesses will do and what organizations will do, what culture does, is create the context in which you make decisions. You feel a ton of autonomy within that certain context, but in reality, the decisions you make are being determined and decided and manipulated by others. We're being shepherded by the choices that our culture is giving us. So think, for example, about how our news feed is now really determined by algorithm. You might think you're getting an unbiased source of news, but in reality, you know this, we're just seeing what Facebook or Twitter wants us to see. Or you think about the rise of fake news or fake videos or misleading articles that influence and manipulate and shape public opinion. This documentary came out not too long ago, and there's a chilling quote in there by a guy named Mark Turnbull, if you've been following the whole Cambridge Analytica thing. And then this is what he said: we just put information into the bloodstream of the internet, and then we watch it grow. It's like a virus. It's the reason things are called viral. You give a little push every now and again, like a remote control. What is that? It's choice architecture. Or think about, okay, closer to home, how we're manipulated into spending money, say at the Washington Square Mall, right? There's been all kinds of studies done on this recently. Business professor Philip Kotler, he uses this term atmospherics, and he's done this whole study for a generation now, how retailers will create an atmosphere that is specifically designed to get you to impulsively spend money that you weren't planning to spend. Just recently, in fact, studies were done on how some retailers will play a certain genre of music that's kind of loud and annoying and repetitive. And what it does is it kind of attacks the neurons of your mind. You're like, you go into panic mode and you'll do anything just to get out. You'll spend $500 not to listen to Spice Girls anymore, right? It's atmospherics, it's choice architecture. We're all being shepherded in some way. We live in this ecosystem of pressure and subtle influences that is shaping our lives. And the dark side to this is that sometimes it's leading us places where we don't want to go, or we end up doing things that are actually destructive. A couple years ago, I came across this article. I may have shared it with you back then, who knows, but it was all about these sheep that plunged off the edge of a cliff in Turkey. Do you guys hear about this? And I think it was 2005 when it first came out, but the headline said, "Sheep jump off cliff in Turkey." Caught my eye, and so I read it, and it said that there was this guy in Istanbul, a shepherd. He went away for a short time to go grab breakfast. He comes back, and all 1,500 of his sheep, while he was away, had jumped off a cliff. And it started with one sheep. One sheep walks to the edge, is like, that looks kind of fun, jumps off, bungee jumping without a rope, and the other sheep are like, that looks, let's follow. And one by one, they all go off the edge of the cliff. Now, here's the interesting bit. 450 of the sheep died out of 1,500. The reason why they didn't all die was because, well, they had a trampoline. They had a cushion, right? And I read that and I thought, perfect. I mean, what a perfect parable, analogy for where we're at as a culture and where we're at often as individuals. You might think that you're unique and forging your own path. But in reality, we're sheep. We're followers. We conform to whatever shepherd may be ahead of us. Now, here's the fascinating bit. What is the number one metaphor in the Bible that God uses of us as people? Sheep, right? We see it here in John chapter 10. Molly just read it to us. Here's another. Psalm 100 verse 3 says, "We are the sheep of his pasture." And so I've been doing a lot of reading up on sheep the last couple of weeks. And you know this. Sheep, they're not known for being the smartest of animals. They're kind of clueless when it comes to danger. They have a propensity to jump off cliffs that they shouldn't. They get lost easily. You know, sheep don't have any natural defenses. They don't have spikes. They don't have a hard shell. They don't spit poison. That would be kind of cool, but they don't. They can't camouflage. They don't roar. Instead, well, they're fluffy, right? And they're slow. There's nothing fierce about being a sheep. Maybe if you have kids, sometimes you'll tell your kids if they can't sleep at night, go count sheep, because sheep are boring, right? There's nothing about a sheep that's threatening. When Jesus calls us sheep, it's not meant to be flattering. He's basically saying, you need help and you need a shepherd. And what I want to share with you guys in the short time that we have together is there is no better shepherd to follow than Jesus. We're all being led. We're all being shepherded by something or someone. So why not make Jesus your shepherd? Why not make him the one that you're chasing after? Because who you follow determines what you become. If your thing is selfishness or greed or lust or politics or comfort or whatever, fill in the blank, it will gradually conform you. Your shepherd will conform you into its image. But if you follow Jesus, you're being changed into a new creation, a son and a daughter of God. There is no shepherd like our shepherd Jesus. And what makes him so unique? Number one, he knows you. He knows you. Look down at verse 14 or look at the screen. He says, I am the good shepherd. I know my sheep know me. Just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. If you're taking notes, you may want to grab a pen, piece of paper, and just circle that word know. When Jesus said, I know my sheep, he's not just talking about cognitive awareness or information. This word know means intimacy, closeness, and relationship. Jesus is saying, I know everything about you. And I found this out too, that shepherds, and maybe this is true today, but certainly in the ancient world, shepherds would actually name their sheep. Now, I was in New Zealand like 6 months ago. Did you know in New Zealand there's more sheep than people? They're absolutely everywhere. To me, I look at a sheep and I just think big fluff ball. But shepherds, they know the nuances of their sheep. They can tell the differences between their sheep. And they would actually give them different names. Dancer, Prancer, Shaun the sheep, whatever. Giving them different names. And it was a way for that shepherd to develop a relationship with his flock. Jesus says, I know you. David, he was a shepherd. He wrote the majority of the book of Psalms. And he said this in Psalm 139, you have searched me, Lord, and you know me. You know when I sit and when I rise. You perceive my thoughts from afar. You discern my going out and my lying down. You are familiar with all my ways. Before a word is on my tongue, Lord, you know it completely. That's kind of scary. For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. Jesus doesn't just know about you, he knows you. He knows your struggles and your heartache and your fears and your hopes and the pain. He knows the pain right now that maybe you're experiencing in your body. He knows how your boss has been treating you. He knows what's awaiting you tomorrow morning. He knows the financial pressure that you're under. He knows about the injustice that maybe you've experienced. He knows about the struggles in your marriage. He knows about your feelings of depression or loneliness or anxiety. And here's the good thing, is that because our shepherd knows everything about us, it means that we don't have to be fake. We don't have to hide anything because he knows it all anyway. We can come to a place like this. We can get on our knees at home. We can open up scripture. We don't have to be fake. We don't have to put on a mask. We don't have to pretend that we're someone we're not, because he already knows us and he loves us and he accepts us. And this is so ironic, because typically it's the opposite. The more you get to know someone, you can get scared and you're like, I think I'm backing out. But God says, I know everything about you and I love you even more. We can be real with him. I think this is why the Bible not only calls us sheep, but Jesus, he later on would say that when we come to the Father, we should come as little what? Children. Because if there's one thing that little children do is they speak their mind. They'll be honest, kind of unfiltered, and tell you what they think. A friend of mine told me a story a few years ago, and I guess it was like one of these stressful evenings when they were having company over, and the mom especially was kind of on edge, and they're trying to get the house all clean and making dinner and all that, and everyone's kind of freaking out at each other. And finally there's a knock on the door, and everyone put on their happy face, hi, welcome. And everyone comes in and they sit down for dinner, and the mom, she turns to her 5-year-old daughter as they're about to eat, and she says, sweetie, can you say grace for the meal? And the 5-year-old, she's like, Mommy, I don't know how to say grace. I don't know what to say. And the mom said, well, you just pray what you hear your mommy say. She's like, okay. Jesus, why did I have to have all these people over? Amen. Jesus said, come as little children. That means, man, we can just come with our ugliness, with our brokenness, with our anxiety, with our fear, because he knows it anyway and he loves us anyway. What makes Jesus a shepherd worth following is that this shepherd knows us completely. He knows you. Number two, not only does he know you, he also fights for you. I love these verses. Verse 12, he said, the hired hand is not the shepherd and doesn't own the sheep. So when he sees the wolf coming, he abandons the sheep and runs away. You know there's a difference between owning and renting, right? If you own a house, you'll probably take care of it. If you rent a house, maybe not so much. Or if you go into a hotel that's not yours, it's like socks and towels and trash. You don't really care too much. Jesus said the hireling doesn't care because he doesn't own the sheep. If he sees a wolf coming, he abandons, runs away. And then the wolf attacks the flock and scatters it. The man runs away because he has is a hired hand and cares nothing for the sheep. Now, here, Jesus compares himself, the good shepherd, to false shepherds, to bad shepherds, or they use the word hireling. By the way, if you want to do a deeper study on this, write down Ezekiel chapter 34. In Ezekiel 34, it's this discourse between good shepherds and bad shepherds, and God is exposing the bad shepherds in ancient Israel. I think Jesus has Ezekiel 34 kind of playing in the background as he's speaking about who he is and his character. And Jesus points out that one of the ways that we can tell if we've been following the wrong shepherd, media, culture, some person, some addiction, whatever, is that that shepherd will only use you to get what they want from you, but then they abandon you when times are tough. Danger comes, a wolf attacks, the hireling's like, peace out, I'm done, I'm not sticking around, because they don't care for the sheep. But Jesus says, you gotta know I'm not that way. I know you and I love you, I'm invested in you, and I'm gonna stand by your side when things are difficult. If you get lost, Jesus would say, I'm gonna leave the 99 and I'm gonna go chase after you. If you're hurt, I'll heal you. If you're hungry, I'll feed you. If you're thirsty, I'll bring you to still waters. If the enemy comes, I will stay and fight. I think this is why David, again, a shepherd, said in Psalm chapter 23, the Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures and still waters. He leads me beside the quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. We did a whole study on that about a year ago called Restore. He restores my soul. He guides me along the right path for his name's sake. And even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Jesus is the kind of shepherd that isn't just with you on the mountaintops when things are well, but he's with you in the darkest valley when you're facing death and crisis and divorce or struggle or heartache or pain or addiction or loneliness. He is with you there too. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. Now, for years, I used to think that the rod and the staff, it was just saying the same thing. I just thought it was like one stick. But over the last couple of weeks, I've come to find out, maybe this isn't news to you, but it was for me, that there's a difference between a rod and a staff. In fact, we have a picture here of a rod and staff. So to the left to my right, I should say, is the staff with the hook on it. And that was primarily an instrument used to shepherd or guide the sheep. So let's say a sheep was about to jump off a cliff and the shepherd's like, that's a bad idea. He would then get the staff and it would hook around his neck and he'd gently pull him away from the edge of the cliff. Or if he's tangled up in some thorn bush or something, he'd grab that staff and pull him back. So the staff was to guide them to the green pastures and the still waters. Now this is what I didn't know. The rod was an entirely different stick that was used as a weapon. And this caught me by surprise because I don't know why, I just never envisioned shepherds as fighters. If you grew up in church or if you've been to Christian bookstores, you think about how Christians have kind of portrayed shepherds and they're always like really gentle. Think of those pictures, like gentle and smiling and like decaf and do yoga, kind of Mr. Rogers with a stick. That's kind of how I envisioned shepherds for many years. But then I've come to find out that's not true. Shepherds are warriors. Shepherds were fighters. If a wolf came and was prowling around the flock, or a thief came to steal a sheep, the shepherd would go all ninja and take them out. Think of David when a lion killed a couple of his sheep, or a bear came. It was payback time. He went out, hunted them down, and killed them. When Jesus says that he's our shepherd, he's not just saying, look, I'm gentle and peaceful and it's all good, just hang out with me and everything's gonna be wonderful. Or he's not even just saying, I'm gonna defend you. Jesus here is saying, I'm going to go on the offense too. I'm gonna attack those things that are attacking you. Jesus in his ministry went after Satan. He went after death. He went after sin. He said the gates of hell would not prevail. Jesus broke into enemy territory. Jesus pushed back on the works of darkness. Colossians 2:15 says, and having disarmed the powers and authorities, he made a public spectacle of them, triumphing over them by the cross. He's a good shepherd that fights for us. And what Jesus did on the cross, disarming the work of darkness, going after the wolf, Satan. If Jesus is your shepherd today, it means that he is going to go after the darkness and the wolf that lives in us too. You guys need to know this. Jesus isn't a passive shepherd. If you choose to make Jesus your shepherd, he's gonna go after the things in your life that aren't pleasing to him. He'll convict you, he'll challenge you, he'll allow you to go through hard things in order to get your attention. Jesus doesn't just sit on the sidelines of your life and say, hey, it's all good. So what? You're going down that path. You're tangled up with that wolf. You know what? You be you. Live your truth. I'm just going to affirm you. Hey, if you want a shepherd that's just going to affirm you and make you feel happy, you've got the wrong shepherd. You need to look for someone else. Because if Jesus is your shepherd, he's not only defensive, he's offensive, and he will go after the darkness that's in our life, challenging, confronting, convicting, and there will be times where our shepherd will even break us. I found this out too. Did you know that in the ancient world, if there was a lamb or a sheep that kept going off track, if that sheep kept wanting to jump off a cliff, if that sheep kept going close to the wolves, given time, that shepherd would take the radical step of, you know what he'd do? He'd break the legs of that sheep. You're like, man, that's ruthless, that's brutal. Yeah, but it was also an act of mercy. Because you know what would happen? He would then take those legs that were broken, he'd bring them back together, he'd wrap it up, and then for months, he would carry that sheep or lamb on his shoulders every single day until that sheep could walk again, until that sheep was healed. And then when the time came, he would put that sheep down, and guess what? The sheep never would leave the side of the shepherd. Not because he was afraid, well, maybe a little, but because in those months of being with the shepherd, that sheep had developed an unbreakable bond, a relationship with his shepherd. Love now was the motivation. And there are times in our life, and I've been there, I know many of you have as well. You've been broken, you've been hurt. God's allowed you to go through something, but it's his way of getting your attention. And he's breaking you in order to heal you, in order to restore you, in order that you can follow him closer and go further than you ever have before. Don't you know this? Jesus, he knows you. Jesus, he fights for you, and fighting for you is not just going after the things that come against you, but it's fighting the wolf that's inside of you. Number 3, Jesus is a good shepherd because he gave his life for you. He said, I am the good shepherd. In fact, why don't we just read this together? It's been really cool. At the 8 and 10, we read it, but you guys are way more alive at the noon gathering. So on the count of 3, I want us to read that verse just in a loud voice. And the reason why is because this is a verse that's worth memorizing. So let's just read it out loud. On the count of 3, 1, 2, 3. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. It wasn't long after this that Jesus, our good shepherd, was led away. He was betrayed with a kiss. He was beaten. They mocked him. His hands and his feet were stabbed with Roman nails. He was pinned to a Roman cross. The innocent one, the one who had done no wrong, he died for us. He bled for us. He took our wolf nature upon himself. The shepherd became a lamb, and he gave his life for his sheep. In Isaiah chapter 53, it says, we all like sheep have gone astray. Each of us has turned to our own way. And the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. He was oppressed and afflicted, yet he did not open his mouth. He was led like a lamb to the slaughter. There is no other shepherd like Jesus. That there's no one else who would give himself for you like Jesus. Other shepherds, it's all about what they can get from you, but only Jesus gave his life for you. Other shepherds will abandon you. Only Jesus will never leave you or forsake you. Other shepherds shame you. Only Jesus will change you. Other shepherds, they will reject you when you fail, but only Jesus can redeem your failure by his grace. There was someone there when Jesus said these words. There was someone listening when Jesus said, "My sheep hear my voice." And his name was Peter. I love Peter. He's probably one of my favorite Bible characters. He constantly messing up. He was like sinking when he should have been walking on the water. He was sleeping when he should have been praying. He was talking when he should have been listening. Foot-shaped mouth, all of that. And yet Jesus loved Peter, his wily sheep. He loved him, gave himself for him. But there was a time when Jesus was led away to the cross. And Peter, he saw what happened, and he should have been with Jesus. He should have followed Jesus. But instead, Peter, he went and he sat by, it says, an enemy's fire. It says it was a fire of coals. And he sat down, and he was warming himself there, and it says a servant girl came up to the fire, and she's like, "Hey, I know you. You're one of Jesus' followers, aren't you?" And Peter's like, "No, not me." He didn't want to kind of put himself in that company, right? He was afraid. He didn't know what was going to happen. And he's like, "No, I don't know Jesus." He's like, "You're lying. I know that you're a follower of Jesus." Which, by the way, people can tell if you're a follower of Jesus. They can just tell whether you deny it or not. And he's like, no, I'm not. She's like, "Come on, just tell the truth. You know Jesus. You were with Jesus." And a third time, he said, "No, I wasn't." What happened? It says, at that moment, a rooster crowed just like Jesus had prophesied. But then it says that Peter looked and he saw Jesus, who was a way off, being led away as a lamb to the slaughter. And they made eye contact. And Peter's heart melted. It says he got up from the fire and he wept bitterly, brokenhearted, full of guilt, full of shame, full of regret. And Peter felt so discouraged and so disheartened. It says that he went back to the lake where Jesus had first called him to be a disciple, and he got in a boat, and it says he went what? Anyone know? Yeah, he went fishing. Peter was a fisherman before he was a disciple. He goes back to the lake and he started fishing, and it says he fished all night and he caught nothing. Which, by the way, whenever we go back to the old places, whenever we go back to the old shepherds, whenever we go back to the old flames or addictions or habits or the way you used to do things before you followed Jesus, you go back to that life and I promise you it's only gonna leave you more empty and discouraged than before. He fishes all night, he catches nothing. And then Jesus showed up, the shepherd. The first thing that Jesus did after rising again from the dead, the good shepherd, he tracks down Peter. He left the 99 to go after the one lost lamb. And he stands at the shore and he calls out to him. He says, "Hey, friend." And that shocks me, because if someone just hurt me and betrayed me, I'd be like, "Hey, loser, ex-disciple." But Jesus called him friend because he calls his sheep by name. "Have you caught anything?" And then a miracle happened. The fisherman actually told the truth. He said, "No, I haven't." It says Peter realized it was the Lord, because the sheep always recognize the voice of the shepherd. It's Jesus. It's him. It's my shepherd. And it says that Peter, he put his coat on and he jumped headlong into the water and he swam to shore, which is kind of surprising to me, because if you're about to go swimming, usually you take things off, then you jump in. But Peter puts on his coat and then jumps in. Why? Because I think that was Peter's way of saying, I am done with this old life. I'm not going back to this place anymore. I'm through with that shepherd. I'm gonna follow my good shepherd, Jesus. From here on out, I'm going after him. And he swam to shore, and it says when he got to shore, what was there? Jesus had made a fire of coals. When was the last time that Peter had seen a fire of coals? It was when he had rejected him, but now Jesus recreates that scenario, not for failure, but for grace and reconciliation, to undo what the enemy had done. And even as Peter had denied him 3 times, Jesus asked him a question. He said, Peter, do you love me? And the word that Jesus used for love is the word agape. Agape in the Greek language means a perfect love, a love that's all in, a love that doesn't fail. And Peter responded and he said, yes, Lord, I love you. But if you actually look at what Peter said, that Greek word that Peter used wasn't agape, it was phileo. And you know what phileo means? It's more like buddy, friend, pal, I like you. Peter, do you agape me? I like you. Jesus asked him again, do you agape me? I like you. Well, why does he say that? Because Peter realized that Jesus knows everything, because the shepherd knows everything about his sheep. And now he's living in a place of naked vulnerability and radical authenticity. I don't want to hide anymore. I don't want to be fake anymore. I don't want to pretend anymore. I'm not who I thought I was. He knows who I am, and yet he still loves me. And I'm just going to be honest with you. I like you. So a 3rd time, Jesus said, well, do you like me? Let's lower the bar a bit. He's like, yeah, I do. And then Jesus said one of the most beautiful, beautiful things. To this fallen sheep, to this guy who had messed up, he said, feed my sheep. Peter, I know you failed. I know you've messed up. I know what you did at the enemy's fire. I know you've made really bad decisions, but I'm still calling you to follow after me. And I'm calling you to be a shepherd, to be a leader, to be a part of this movement, this revolution that is going to sweep the globe. And you read the book of Acts, that is exactly what happened. That fallen sheep became a shepherd who raised up other sheep, who became shepherds, who raised up other sheep. And here we are today in 2019. And I want you to know today that no matter what your story is, even if this last week you've been sitting at an enemy's fire and you've gone back to some things you know that you shouldn't have, you've been fishing all night and you've caught nothing, I believe God brought you here because he's standing at the shore of your life. Friend, he's calling you by name. He's made the fire of coals and he's saying, I want to use you. I want your life to be a part of my story. I want you to be a shepherd. I want you to be a leader. I have a plan for you and I have a purpose for you. And the enemy's been trying to rip you off and the wolf's been coming against you and there's been darkness maybe that's clawing at you. But I will have the last word because I am the good shepherd. And if you follow after me, I'm going to transform you into a son and a daughter of God. That can be your story. And that's what the Lord invites you to today. Hey, you gotta serve somebody. It might be the devil. It might be the Lord. We're all followers. We're all sheep. Why not follow the only shepherd who actually loves you and fights for you and cares for you and gave his life for you and will transform you from this day on forever?